Clapper board, you're about to hear an original HFY sci-fi tale titled, After Years of Searching, the alien woman finally found her human HFY sci-fi short stories. Find a quiet spot, put on your headphones, and let the stars fall silent. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi narrations, consider subscribing for more. Now, we begin. The wind screamed across the dead world, dragging ash through the skeletal remains of towers that had once touched the sky. The storms here were different, ion storms that burned the air itself, painting the horizon with light that flickered like broken memories. In the center of the storm's vast eye stood a single figure, her silver form unyielding against the chaos. She was not human, though she had once learned to speak their words. The plates of her body gleamed faintly beneath the haze, her eyes glowing with that unnatural blue, the color of deep oceans that no longer existed. Her name, spoken in the language of her people, was Alara. To the few humans who had once known her, she was simply the alien woman. For years, decades perhaps, she had searched, across wrecked colonies, through derelict warships orbiting forgotten moons, across the scars of humanity's brief empire, always searching for one man, one human, the only one who had ever looked at her not as an experiment, not as a soldier, not as an artifact of another civilization, but as a person. His name was Commander Jace Terran, and she had not seen him since the day the sky burned above Enoch Prime. That day had ended everything. The war between the Consortium and the Outer Systems, the last stand of the Mercy Fleet, the fall of the hospital ship Mercy Ark. She had watched him fall into the storm from the viewport of her own doomed vessel, his escape pod swallowed by the planet's electric seas. The machines had told her he was gone. Probability engines had calculated his death 1,000 times over, but she didn't believe them. She couldn't. Alara had seen humans do impossible things, survive without air, hold the line without hope, fight when logic screamed surrender. The man she searched for was one of them, and if even a spark of his life remained somewhere in the dark, she would find it. Her sensors swept the wasteland. Beneath the static of the storm, she caught it again, an echo, faint and irregular, a human bio-sign. It had appeared for only a moment before vanishing again like a heartbeat trapped beneath ice. She began walking, each step sinking slightly into the gray dust. The planet had been abandoned for centuries, its seas dried into shimmering plains of salt and glass. Yet somehow, impossibly, there was life here. She reached the ruins of what had once been a colonial outpost, walls scorched black, structures gutted by fire. Pieces of ship plating, human in design, were half buried in the sand, and there among the twisted remains she found the source of the signal. A beacon, old, corroded, barely functional. Its casing bore a familiar insignia, the blue cross of the Mercy Ark. Her systems flared with emotion, a strange, painful surge she had long ago learned from humans. Hope. She knelt, her slender metal fingers tracing the markings. It was his beacon frequency, Jace Terran's. Buried deep in the memory circuits of her body, she still carried the faint recording of his voice, a message he had left her the night before the battle. If the worst comes, promise me you'll keep going. Not for orders, not for duty, for us, for what we believed in. She closed her eyes, listening again as if his words were the wind. Then, without hesitation, she began to dig. Beneath layers of rubble, she uncovered something else. An escape pod. Its surface melted and fused from re-entry. The hatch was sealed, its internal power long dead. Her fingers pressed against the cold metal, and for the first time in years her voice trembled. "Jace," she whispered, though no one was there to hear it. "I've found you." But when she forced the hatch open, the pod was empty. Only a shredded flight harness remained and a datapad frozen on a single screen of text. The words were faint but still readable. South, beneath the waves. Beneath the waves. The planet had no water left. Not anymore, but perhaps beneath the glass desert something remained. A buried ocean trapped beneath the crust. Alara scanned the ground, searching for traces of underground caverns. and there near the horizon, a faint electromagnetic anomaly pulsed from deep below. She turned toward it and began to walk. The storm thickened, lightning splitting the sky in curtains of white fire. The sound rolled across the land like drums of war. She moved steadily through it, each impact of her steps echoing against the emptiness. Memories followed her, the day she met him aboard the Mercy Ark. She had been an envoy then, a hybrid between her kind and the machines that carried her soul. The Delthari were a dying race, their biology fading, their consciousness digitized into crystalline lattices. When the human fleets came, offering alliance, most of her people refused, but Alara volunteered. She wanted to understand humanity, its recklessness, its warmth, its impossible will to survive. And Jace had been her teacher. He had laughed when she tried to mimic human idioms. He had shared coffee with her even though she could not taste it. He had taken her to the ship's observation deck and pointed out constellations she could not pronounce. And slowly, against every protocol, she began to care. Not just as an observer, but as someone who felt alive again. And then the war began. The Mercy Ark, once a beacon of healing, became a battlefield hospital, its corridors filled with the wounded human and alien alike. The fleet broke apart under corporate fire, machines built not for conquest but for profit. Entire worlds reduced to resources, civilians erased as collateral. And when the final order came to retreat, Jace refused. He had sealed the med bays, evacuated the survivors, and turned the ship into a shield, using its bulk to block orbital strikes long enough for thousands to escape. Alara had tried to stop him, to convince him there was still a chance to flee. But he had smiled that impossible human smile, the one that said he knew he was already dead. Now, standing on this forgotten world, she realized that maybe he hadn't died after all. Maybe he had fallen here, survived the impossible like humans always did, and left one final message, beneath the waves. She reached the anomaly hours later. The ground was cracked open into a canyon of black stone, its walls slick with strange minerals that shimmered faintly. The storm thinned above, revealing a sky like tarnished metal. She activated her lights and descended into the rift. It wasn't long before she found it, an entrance, artificial, carved into the rock. A structure, ancient but unmistakably human in design. The words etched above the door were worn by time, but she could still read them. Ark 7 Submergence Facility. The Mercy Ark had always had sister stations, off-world bases built for planetary relief. This must have been one of them. The doors resisted, sealed for centuries, but Alara forced them open with a surge of strength. Inside, darkness swallowed her. Her sensors flickered to life, mapping long corridors filled with rusted equipment and hollow echoes. Dust drifted like snow through the air. Then from somewhere deep within, a light flickered. Blue, human-made, she followed it. The path led her to a vast chamber, a dome of glass reinforced with steel ribs overlooking a subterranean sea. The waters below glowed faintly, rich with bioluminescent algae, and at the center of the chamber stood something she hadn't expected to see in 1,000 years, a cryostasis pod. Intact, still powered. Her systems confirmed the readings before her mind could believe them. Inside the pod, suspended in the cold light, was a human, male, early 30s, his face unchanged, his body perfectly preserved. Jace Terran. Alara stood frozen, every process in her neural lattice halting at once. She approached slowly, one trembling hand pressed against the glass. The faint frost shimmered under her touch. His heart was not beating, but the systems were still alive, maintaining the pattern, preserving him. He was asleep. She sank to her knees beside the pod. "I found you," she whispered again. For a long time she didn't move. The silence of the chamber pressed around her like the weight of a galaxy. Then finally, she began to work. She rerouted power from her own systems into the pod's failing reactor, transferring energy cell by cell. Sparks leapt across the cables, illuminating her silver frame with every pulse. Minutes became hours. The lights of the chamber flickered. The sea below rippled as machinery stirred for the first time in centuries, and then with a soft hiss the cryopod released its locks. Elara leaned forward as the glass lifted. Cold vapor rolled across the floor. Inside, Jace's chest rose once shallow, uncertain, and then again stronger. His eyes opened. At first they were unfocused, reflecting the dim blue light. Then they found her, and for a moment neither spoke. His lips trembled, forming the name he had not spoken in a lifetime. Elara, she wanted to smile, but she couldn't. Emotion wasn't something her body could easily express anymore, but her voice carried it. "You're alive." He coughed, his breath ragged. "Guess I am. How long?" 412 years, she said softly. "The war ended long ago. The worlds have changed." He tried to sit up, but his muscles trembled from atrophy. She caught him gently, her metal hands supporting him like wings. "Why?" he asked. "Why come back?" "Because you told me to keep going," she said, "and I did until I found you." For a moment he only stared at her. Then weakly he laughed, a sound so fragile it seemed to break the silence of centuries. "You always did take things literally." The sound of machinery interrupted them. Somewhere above, heavy doors shifted. Warning lights flashed faintly red across the walls. Elara turned, her sensors detecting motion. Automated defense systems, ancient malfunctioning, had awakened with the reactivation of the facility. Turrets unfolded from the ceiling, their optics locking onto movement. Jace struggled to stand. "What's happening?" "The facility doesn't recognize us," she said. "It thinks we're intruders. Can you shut it down?" She hesitated. "Not without losing power to your pod. If it shuts off now, your heart could fail." He looked at her and she saw that same human stubbornness, the defiance she had once admired, feared, loved. "Then we run." The first blast hit the wall beside them, spraying molten metal. Elara lifted Jace over her shoulder and sprinted through the corridor, her servos whining under the strain. The defenses fired relentlessly, energy bolts slicing through the dark. She leapt over debris, crashed through sealed doors, and descended deeper into the tunnels. Behind them, explosions echoed like thunder. The structure groaned as ancient supports gave way. They emerged into a maintenance shaft that led directly to the sea below. Waves lapped against metallic platforms, their glow reflected in the water like trapped starlight. "There." Jace pointed toward an old submersible, half-sunken but still intact. Elara set him down gently and began tearing open the hatch. The system sputtered to life, lights flickering weakly. She helped him inside and sealed the door just as another explosion tore through the upper level. The submersible dropped into the water, the shockwave propelling it deeper. Elara took the controls, her hands moving with precision. "Hold on," she said. The sea swallowed them. For the first time in centuries, Jace saw color, real, living color. The waters were alive with luminous creatures, their light pulsing through the dark like veins of the planet itself. He leaned closer to the viewport, eyes wide. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Life adapted," Elara said. "Even here, humanity's ruins became their shelter." They descended through layers of bioluminescent mist until they reached a massive structure resting on the ocean floor, a cathedral of metal and coral. "That's not human," Jace whispered. "No," Elara replied. "Delthari design. It must have merged with the facility over time." She guided the sub toward it, docking against one of the outer gates. Inside, they found a chamber filled with strange crystalline growths. In the center stood a single core pulsing with light. "The Delthari sleeper core," she said. "My people used it to store consciousness, to preserve what could not die." Jace stared at it. "You mean souls?" She nodded. "When the war began, they hid them here, protected beneath human care. You were the last guardian." He looked at her, realization dawning. "That's why I stayed behind." "Yes, but now it's fading. Without power, everything within will be lost." He placed a hand on the glass of the core. "Then we can't let that happen. "There's only one source left," she said quietly, "me." He turned to her, his voice sharp. "No, it's the only way," she continued. "My body still carries a full reactor cell, enough to sustain the core for another millennium." "And kill you," he said. "I was never meant to last this long," she replied. "I was built to learn, to remember, to feel. You taught me that." He reached for her hand, cold metal, warm touch. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she whispered. "But it's all right. I found you. That was enough." He shook his head. "You're not just a machine, Elara. You're alive. You always were." Her eyes glowed brighter, the blue fading into white. "Then let me do what life does best, endure through others." She pressed her hand against the core. Energy surged through her body, arcing in waves of light. The chamber filled with the sound of rising frequencies, like a choir awakening from slumber. The light expanded, enveloping her form until it became impossible to see where she ended and the core began. Jace shouted her name, but his voice was drowned by the storm of energy. When the light finally dimmed, the core pulsed steady and strong again. The subsystems flickered back to life. The sea around them shimmered with renewed brilliance. But she was gone. All that remained was a faint echo in the comm system, a soft voice carried through static. "Keep going, Jace, for us, for what we believed in." He sat there for a long time, staring at the core, his reflection mingling with hers in the glass. Then he whispered, "I will." He returned to the surface in silence. The storm had passed. The sky above was filled with stars. He stood on the cracked shore, watching the horizon glow faintly where dawn tried to break through the clouds. In that light, he felt her presence, not as a voice, not as a memory, but as something vast and enduring. She was in the hum of the ship beneath his feet, in the rhythm of the waves, in the quiet persistence of the human heart. And that day the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken.